American society, but also internally, where we have communists operating within the United States, working hand in glove sometimes with the Chinese Communist Party to overthrow it. So it's one fight against an external foe and an internal foe, but it's one enemy that we've been fighting for over 100 years.
It's really an important point. What would you say is the historical strategy, if you will, of communist movements inside the United inside of the United States, and what have they subverted and infiltrated inside of America in terms of our political institutions?
Well, that's so. Speaker was making, Speaker Johnson and President Trump, that this is an existential threat. It's an immediate threat today.
We'll often hear from naysayers and perhaps communists or socialists that Republicans are fear-mongering with this threat of communism, the Red Scare, and that it's, you know, another boogeyman. Talk to us, if you could, about sort of real-life practice in how these communists have been able to subvert and change American institutions.
Well, they've been able to do it precisely because of their control of the ideas industry, right? So they're able to say, well, X, Y, or Z is McCarthyite, or we're victims of McCarthyism, or there's a neo-McCarthyism, right, which is completely divorced from American history. Right? McCarthy was right. There are communists operating in U.S. government, as Whittaker Chambers, of course, as Attorney General Palmer identified as well under the Wilson administration. There are communists trying to undermine the American political system, using the ideas industry, principally our political system, to gradually shift. Hollywood needs to be mentioned as well, the entertainment industry, because folks are looking at a film for entertainment. They don't realize that, in fact, there are messages in those films which are moving them towards that direction. So they're, again, Steve, they're experts at political warfare. They know what to penetrate and have done so effectively, and it's time to reverse it.
You mentioned Hollywood, and it reminds me of Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, exactly.
That was one of his first initiatives before being president was even probably a thought in his mind.
When he was union leader, right, he resisted the communist efforts to take over the union.
So this has been going on for decades.
It has indeed, and folks need to recognize that, and it's hurt us immeasurably. Folks don't realize, Steve, that when Lenin came to power, he made peace with the Germans. That allowed the Germans in World War I to shift divisions against Americans, the French and the British, of course, Belgian forces that were fighting on the Western Front. Right? He killed Americans in that struggle. Folks don't realize that communists penetrated unions in the interwar period. And when Hitler and Stalin signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, when they reached that agreement, the Soviets were actually trying to hinder American rearmament through labor strikes, very famously at North American Aviation. Right? So we need to recognize that this has imposed real cost. It's killed Americans in the Cold War, in World War I. And we need to recognize that this threat is a very real one, and it's with us today. Inevitably, whenever communists take power, you're going to have tears and bloodshed. And that will be true in America, heaven forbid, if they ever do take power, as it was in China, Russia, the Soviet Union, or Central and Eastern Europe, or Cuba. Wherever they've come to power, the story is always the same. Tremendous violence and destruction of societies.
Several races have DSA candidates on the ballot this November. Why the communist ideologies persisted despite its violent history, and how has a Marxist mindset distorted Americans' views of our nation's values? More importantly, who's pushing the rise of far-left causes right here in America? Coming up, we'll continue the discussion with Bradley Thayer. As you said, communism has never worked anywhere that it's been applied, whether you look at Cuba, Venezuela, socialism there, on the brink, maybe microwave communism, China, we can see, Vietnam, everywhere, it just doesn't work. Why do you think that sort of, it's not rhetoric, that historical sort of fact doesn't resonate with people that are still pushing for it?
Steve, I think because the communists own the ideas industry, right? So they're able to dismiss the logic of communism, which is an absurdity, right? It's completely insane. The communists say that I have a scientific understanding of society, so you need to put me in charge. And that's absurd. And then the empirical evidence, which is overwhelming. Everywhere it's been tried, it's led to bloodshed and destruction and violence. So how could you, with that record, how could you sustain it? Well, if you own the ideas industry, you don't teach that history. You don't teach the absurdity of the logic. You say, well, we should be united in a collective. We should be moving towards this direction. And so you're able to advance it. Again, it underscores the fact that the ideas industry is absolutely essential, and we need to take back control over that, as well as to evict them from our political system.
You just made me think. On our walk into the studio, we were talking about liberalism, and you made an interesting comment that you think that liberalism needs to be restored to its original sort of meaning and intent, and then mentioning how they have hijacked sort of the idea space. How far has liberalism shifted, and what is it now, and what do you think it needs to return to?
Well, I think it needs to return to really what it truly means, which is really the focus on the individual. Political liberals see people as individuals. They don't see them as groups. Communists see people as groups. You're white, you're male, you're a woman, right? You're working class, you're an oppressor, or you're the oppressed.
LGBT.
Absolutely. You're not a human, you're a group. Liberals see people, political liberals see people as individuals, historically. Those individuals are given rights by God. And frustration with one another to worsen, because that makes their coming to power more likely.
And the Trump administration is using all of the tools of the U.S. government to uproot ideologies that are aligning with socialism and communism, and very closely linked to political terrorist organizations. But where are the financiers of the groups getting all of their funding? All signs point to the CCP. Coming up, we'll wrap up my interview with Bradley Thayer.
Hi, I'm
Independence Day, you mentioned empirical science earlier. Shocking data heading into America's 250th with, a resounding number of Democrats just not feeling proud to be American.
Yes. Yeah.
That's public data. It's really sad, to say the least.
It's terrifying. It's terrifying.
It is. Revolutions, movements like the Democratic Socialists of America, they're expensive. You mentioned some of these front organizations. Talk to us about the funding networks, including the NGO sort of ecosystem behind all of it.
Well, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, backed by President Trump, of course, have been rolling that up in the State Department, right, where we're discovering, every day we're discovering new things about how corrupt that was. But we need to recognize that what the Soviets did, what Lenin did, was create a Comintern, a communist international, to spread the communist revolution worldwide. And in fact, the Comintern created the Chinese Communist Party and disciplined Americans to create the American Communist Party in the States. We don't have a Comintern today, but it's privatized. Steve, we now have George Soros and his son. We have, again, Neville Roy Singham, and they operate through many front organizations to fund these groups, because they want the worse the better from their perspective, because they're neo-Bolsheviks at the end of the day. So the funding is absolutely important. Now, of course, that's going to be carefully hidden, and we'll go through many other elements. But we do see from the Southern Poverty Law Center and the investigations of the Southern Poverty Law Center that, in fact, at least in that instance, they didn't cover their tracks very well in terms of how they spent their money and abused it. So I think the U.S. government needs to look at this very closely, and Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, needs to look at this very closely to see where this money is going, and I think we'll see it's going back to the Soroses, the Singhams, but really also where are the Soroses and the Singhams getting support? The Chinese Communist Party.
That's the question I wanted to ask you. Neville Roy Singham, American businessman, very successful, billionaire, I believe he is, or very close to, but he lives in China. What sort of, I guess, hand in the pie does China have in all of this?
Well, you couldn't live as a billionaire in Shanghai without without having the approval of the Chinese Communist Party. That's by definition. So this is an individual who's working hand in glove with the Chinese Communist Party for nefarious purposes from the standpoint of the health and well-being of the American people and the national security of the United States. This fellow is a direct threat to American national security. So he's working with the Chinese Communist Party, who's undermining us in every way, both domestically in the United States and also internationally. So that needs to be he should be famous as an individual. As Armand Hammer was during the Cold War, as a scoundrel, right? Armand Hammer, with Occidental Petroleum, worked with the Soviets, right, to extract oil from the Soviet Union and sell it on the international line. So Armand Hammer was an American, but he was working with the Soviets. And most Americans, of course, rejected him, right, saw him as a traitor, as a scoundrel, and as somebody who should not be part of polite society or any society. Singham needs to be seen in the same way, and so do Soros. And that's only going to come when you can actually get in there, if you will, lift up the hood of these many front organizations and see what's actually going on. When you understand communism, you recognize, again, that it's illegitimate. Look, this is just made out of whole cloth. These guys say, I've got a scientific understanding of society, and I'm going to take over your country. And I'll destroy whatever I need to destroy to do it. So, formidable threat, but at one level, it's an absurdity. Right? These guys have no legitimate reason to rule whatsoever. The Chinese Communist Party is a product of Soviet imperialism. The Soviets made the Chinese Communist Party. They put it into power, ultimately. It was Stalin who, as well as mistakes that Americans made at that time, that allowed the Chinese Communist Party to come to power. And it was still remained a product of the Soviet Union. Of Soviet imperialism. We need to see it as such. Again, an illegitimate government. There's nothing legitimate about communists ruling in Beijing, put in place by the Soviet Union in an imperialist project. They're a colonial government, in essence. They're not Chinese. They have nothing to do with Han civilization, the greatness of Han civilization whatsoever, and that needs to be seen as such. It's a gang of thugs who are ruling in that country. With Xi Jinping, we see this, it's underscored every day. As this leader is taking the People's Republic of China in even ever more so a neo-Stalinist direction, with his emphasis on communist ideology, with his crackdowns, with his eliminations, firings through his quote-unquote anti-corruption campaign. This fellow should be seen as a neo-Stalinist. So when folks understand the true nature of the Chinese Communist Party, the hundreds of millions of people that they killed in famines, in wars, civil war, in wars, in famine, or in utero, obviously through forced abortions, the world should have nothing to do with this organization. It should be treated worse than apartheid South Africa during the Cold War, as beyond the pale, as not part of international society, and we shouldn't recognize them. So that, I think, is very important when you understand the illegitimacy of the Chinese Communist Party. And we look forward to the day when they're no longer in power and the Chinese people rule themselves.
Bradley Thayer, wonderful new book. Please tell us where we can get it and when it will be available.
Well, Steve, folks can get it wherever they buy books, Amazon or Barnes & Noble, and the official publication date is August 18th, 2026. Thank you so much, Steve.
8/18. Fantastic. Bradley Thayer, greatly appreciate you sitting down with us.
My